Eliot, and I'm Director of Education and Strategic Initiatives at the National Cybersecurity Alliance. And I want to welcome you to today's webinar. So the National Cybersecurity Alliance is a nonprofit public-private partnership devoted to cybersecurity education and awareness. And we do that through convening partners who recognize the strength in the security collective. We do that through educating individuals and organizations on cybersecurity best practices. And we do that through amplifying collective efforts to increase cybersecurity awareness, because we can't do everything. And so we want to be sure that we're making sure that you and your colleagues and the constituents of the country at large know what some of the best resources are and how to access those resources. We also deploy our education through large-scale campaigns. So we do that through National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which we co-lead every October with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. We do that through Data Privacy Day, which is recognized every January 28th. And we do that through our Cybersecure My Business program. And this webinar is part of the Cybersecure My Business series. Now, all of our small to medium-sized enterprise efforts are free to you, thanks to our national sponsors. And so the national sponsors of the Cybersecurity My Business program are Trend Micro as our signature sponsor, Generali Global Assistance as our affiliate sponsor, and then we have a strategic partner of ITSP Magazine. So I want to thank them for making all of this available to you for free. And it's not just these webinars that they make available to you for free. It's the in-person workshops that we do across the country when we used to do them, and when we return to them at some point in the future. Our collateral that we push out, educational information that we push out to the small, medium-sized business community, our newsletter, all of that's made available to you for free, thanks to their generosity. So today you're going to be hearing from two guest speakers. The first speaker you'll hear is Tonia Dudley, who's the Director and Security Solution Advisor at Cofense. And then you'll hear from Mitchel Chang, who's the Vice President of Corporate and Social Responsibility and Education at Trend Micro. Both companies and individuals, I'm happy to say, are board member companies of the National Cybersecurity Alliance. And so we want to thank them for being such active participants in helping others know how to identify threats and reduce those threats. And so let's see, we have the poll. We're going to launch poll number 2 here in just a moment. And so we're going to close the first poll, and that'll be in 17 seconds. And then Tonia, I'm going to unmute you while we collect our final 10 seconds of responses.
Okay. Is it going to show me the results? Because I would love to see the results of.
Yeah, I'm going to provide an overview of the results here.
Okay. All right.
And poll number 2 is open. And so when we ask respondents, how confident do you feel in identifying a malicious email or text message? We have 31 out of 111 say they are highly confident. So we have a great group of individuals on the call today. We have 37 who responded they're somewhat confident. And then we have 4 out of 111 who said not confident at all, help. And so quite a mix, but and then we still have 39 who have yet to respond. So we have a good mix between highly confident and somewhat confident.
That's good to know, because I'm going to go through some examples today that's going to highlight why it can be difficult.
All right, so I'm going to turn it over to you now, Tonia.
Alrighty, well, thanks, Daniel, and I appreciate Trend Micro for sponsoring these series. I think it's important. I have a heart for small business owners because I have a good friend who owns a small business, and so as I was watching her get set up, I was trying to help her and cringed on the fact that, you know, small business owners are limited in their resources. So like Daniel said, I'm from Cofense. We are a board member. We highly support being able to get information out to everyone, right? Making sure that everyone can really understand cybersecurity, and our sweet spot is phishing defense. And so I won't go into all the details here. We originally started as PhishMe, and a couple years ago we changed our name to Cofense because we are more than just phishing security awareness that we started out in the beginning. We've evolved to really full phishing defense, and really that's our sweet spot, is really to help organizations defend against not only training, but then defending against that real phish. And so we have some solutions that help organizations with that. So Dan, if you can go on to the next slide. All right, so I'm going to start with the basics, right? What are the different types of phishing? So we know URL link, right? We might get an email that has a URL link in it. And in the past, we've always told organizations and users to hover over that link to see where it's going. But so many providers now provide a URL defense mechanism against that URL. So really that hover is hard to really distinguish where you're going on that. And I'll get a little bit deeper into that in a little bit. And then credential theft. So it starts with a link, but then when you get to that landing page, they're asking you to log in with your credentials. And then an attachment. So having a file attached to an email that when you open it, it either takes you to a website to, again, ask for your credentials, or number two is it is installing malicious malware onto your device to either compromise it or even to install a keylogger. There's various types, and I think I have a slide that kind of talks about that a little bit. Then there's actually a fourth type which isn't mentioned on here, and that's BEC, which is business email compromise, or what we also call CEO fraud. There's none of these elements that are included in that, and I'm going to get into some details in a little bit, because as a small business, it's hard to fight against this one for many reasons, and I'll get into that a little bit more when we get to that BEC slide, and I do believe Mitchell has some info on that as well. So I won't go too deep into it so that he can cover his aspect of that. And so Daniel, if you go ahead to the next slide. So let's just start with the basics of how to identify a phish, right? So some of you said you were kind of not fully sure, right? And I can tell you that the threat actors have gotten really good at understanding your business model, what you do, and making those emails look very legitimate. They're also, because they're stealing credentials, logging into people's email boxes and scraping real emails. And so that's why it's really hard to really distinguish a real message versus a phishing. And so you really have to spend some time looking at, what is it that they're asking you to do? Do you recognize that sender? Maybe you recognize the sender, but there's something about the cues of the rest of the message that maybe seem a bit off and make you stop and listen to your spidey sense, right? And maybe even just pick up the phone and call that person asking, did you mean to send this to me? Are you really looking for me to send you an invoice, or click on this link to download an invoice, or that sort of thing? Grammar errors, that one's, we see both, right? We see that they, if they're building those phishing kits, that, there's still grammar errors there, right? Because English might not be their first language. But like I said, if they're scraping those messages, they're getting real messages. And so they might sound okay. And then if there's a URL link on there, again, hovering to see where is that taking you to. If you happen to click on it, looking at the URL in the bar and in the browser to see, is this really where I'm supposed to be going? And is this legitimately somebody that I should be doing business with? And then they're asking for sensitive information. All right, if you can go to the next slide. I know because the theme of this was smishing and phishing. So when we look at something you might get on your mobile device, all the elements are still the same, right? They're still, do you recognize this phone number? You can do a reverse lookup on it to see, okay, who really owns this phone number? Is it a spam? Are they asking you, the emotional appeal? Grammar, it could be a trigger. But then again, typically when we have customers that will ask us, can we train on how to do Identify Smishing? It's a little tricky, right? Because now you're potentially using their personal data to send a text message to, but ultimately at the end of the day, they're asking you to give up sensitive information when they're sending you a text message. So if you're clicking on that link, don't provide your, they're usually asking you for PII or credentials. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so I want to walk through some of the messages. So we, at the beginning of early March, when we started to really understand that the coronavirus and the threat actors are really starting to leverage this and being very targeted with these messages. We stood up an info center that has a lot of these messages on there, because we also said, I told our customers and organizations that you shouldn't be, there's enough hype and fear around this, pandemic right now, that we don't want you to simulate these. We often tell customers to, align your phishing simulations to active threats, so that your users are really seeing what the threat actors would really land into their inbox. But this one, we said we need to pause on this one. So what we did is we stood up the info center. We have almost every day we're posting new images that we're finding where threat actors are using this theme in their messages. This one is an interesting one. That PDF actually wasn't a PDF. It was just an image of a PDF that took you to the link of the browser there in the turquoise teal color, that said, it was very simple, right? Download this file and encrypted. And then when you do click on the link, you're getting an image of this PDF that I probably need to look at, and then it's asking for you to log in with your credentials. Next slide. And again, they're leveraging every type of business function that you would normally use, right? So if we're using VoIP and for our phone messages, they're directing you to kind of click on this link. And if you can tell by looking at that link, there's something that looks off about this. Again, going to that URL site, it's asking for your Microsoft login credentials. Again, just taking pause when you get there. Is this our company's voicemail system? Is this what we're using? Next slide. This one was an interesting one. So, if you read over this email in your brain, it sounds like it's a legitimate message. When you read it out loud, you kind of get some contextual cues about the grammar in this one. This one was an interesting one again. There's multiple layers that they are starting to really use. So if I click on that link and then or that attachment, and if you go to the next slide, it actually opens up a OneNote file. And then in this OneNote, then it has the document that you're led to believe that you need to read, and then you're given that Microsoft Office login, and then taken to a third layer. So this was multiple layers, and we're starting to see that they're trying to find ways to get through the secure email gateways that we all are using because they're necessary, right? But they're finding ways to still get through those. So that's still important to really arm your organization and your users with what to look for when you see these phishing emails. Next slide. Okay, so I talked a little bit about BEC, and so again, this is there's no links in here, there's no attachments. It's just asking for a follow-up. And so when you're looking at this first email, when you look at it on your phone, and I think I have an image on the next slide, but when you're getting these emails, when you see it on your phone, you don't see that fully qualified email address. So this person actually responded, and it was probably at that point that I saw, oh, that wasn't really the person that I normally deal with in my company, because it was made to look like it was that person that they work with, Darren, but that email address is not really Darren's email. And so at that point, then they reported it to their security operations center to say, this was not a good email to get. And again, we're seeing them use gift cards. They're using things to still align with the COVID theme, getting people to donate, gift cards. We're also seeing them use this message style for, hey, I need you to change my direct deposit banking information so that when my paycheck, because I just changed my bank account. So when we see these messages, we need to remind everyone that we have processes in place, right? And we have controls that we follow so that we can prevent a mishap here. The FBI reported that this was a $26 billion problem last year. So specific to VEC CEO fraud, because organizations aren't putting these sending the wire, reacting to these messages, and sometimes they're asking for big amounts. They're not small amounts that they're asking for, but we continue to see this theme of gift cards. They also may take it offline to, hey, can you text me from this number or to this number, and then have a conversation there so it's less tracked. And I know Mitchel's going to go a little bit more into that, so I won't go too deep. Dana could go to the next slide. So I just wanted to show a couple of those. I mentioned the direct deposit, the gift cards, just asking for them. And then I use this example here because if you could see the mobile version on the lower right-hand corner there, you can't see that full email address. But when I look at it in my desktop app, I can see the full email address listed out. All right, next slide. So what are the type of messages that we're seeing? So when we see attachments, we're seeing all types of malicious files being delivered in a zip file, in a PDF file. We're seeing PDFs with links in them. So a PDF attachment that has a link then that goes to a malicious website. And we're also seeing ransomware delivered this way as well, using the bit.ly link. So they're trying to find ways that they can still get through your security controls and make it into the inbox of the user that will ultimately infect their machine or grab their credentials. Slide. So what are some things that you can do? So you want to keep your work and your personal separate where possible. So trying to make sure that you're not using your work device to look at your personal email. If you're able to, right? I know when you're running a small business, that's not always easy, right? Because your one device is your device. So just using cautious where you can when it comes to keeping those transactions separate. Keeping your devices updated. When we look through a lot of those malicious attachments, they're not leveraging zero-day vulnerabilities. They're leveraging vulnerabilities that have been patched many years. One of the ones that we see come up quite a bit is CVE 2017-11882. Yes, 2017, which is 3 years old, that they continue to leverage to deliver some of these malicious malware. And then protecting your credentials. Again, a lot of what we're seeing, over 75% of the phishing emails that we're seeing today are going after those credentials. So making sure that if you're able to enable two-factor, please do, because we do see that organizations that have two-factor are less targeted than those that aren't, because there's such a broad reach that they can get to for organizations that don't have two-factor enabled. And getting those credentials is ultimately what they want to be able to get to, right? Because now they can log into your networks, into your systems, into your cloud applications as a legitimate user. And then just taking your time and using caution when you're reading those emails. Typically, they know when to send those messages at the time of day when they know you're going to be busy and most likely to react to clicking on that link, opening the attachment, or putting in your credentials. Next slide. Some of the trends that we're also seeing is when it comes to the subject lines, they're finance related. They're asking for invoices, purchase orders, remittance slip. We continue to see that is probably the #1 theme that that they're sending those to. So especially when you're talking to your, the people that run your finance transactions, making sure that they're really paying attention and really understand when it's legitimate, when to just pick up the phone and do some cross-validation. Is this something that they should be expecting? And then credential phish, again, that was what I just mentioned. And then the multiple layers, right? They're trying to find ways to make it into the inbox to get past those secure email gateways. And we're finding this more and more of these layers that they're using to bypass those technologies. And I think that was my last slide, Daniel.
Thank you so much, Tonia, for that. I really appreciate it. That's a lot of good information. And I can't emphasize those lessons that you shared as far as enabling two-factor authentication and updating your software. All of that is so important.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think that cybersecurity is so expensive. They start seeing dollar signs when they start hearing the word cybersecurity. But those steps you can take often don't cost anything at all to do.
Right, because a lot of the technologies, even G Suite and Microsoft, they come with that MFA kind of as part of their package that they give you. So just enable it, especially for your highly sensitive users.
Right. And for those of you who don't understand, they're not going to automatically, in most cases, enable two-factor authentication. So oftentimes you'll need to go into your security and privacy settings and select to enable two-factor or multi-factor authentication, because oftentimes they just won't default to that setting.
Correct. Yeah.
So Tonia, thank you so much. I am going to mute you now and unmute Mitchel Chang. And for all of you who are on the line, just know that we are going to be doing a Q&A session at the end of this webinar. So please go ahead and start submitting those questions, and we'll get to those at the end. And Tonia and Mitchel will chip away at them as much as we can. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Mitchel Chang, Vice President in Corporate Social Responsibility and Education. And Mitchel, you are now unmuted.
Thank you. If you want to go ahead and advance the slides. One thing I do want to mention when you hear two-factor or multi-factor authentication, and usually what we're talking about is information, something you know, or something you have, like fingerprint, or iris scan, or facial scan, and also potentially like a password. So the more factor create more security in case you need to get into a system, and you can always break the system, hack the system, but usually it will give you more protection. And for Trend Micro in this slide, I just want to say we've been around a long time, the cybersecurity company. And my mission here is representing our corporate social responsibility program is really to help educate the community. So that's why we sponsor events like this one with NCSA and the team here. And because our vision is making a world safe for exchanging digital information. So educating the community actually is quite an important aspect of us. And in addition to this program, we have a program with universities as well as K-12 school people on the internet safety for kids and family. Okay, Daniel, next slide. Okay, well, one thing about this with the COVID-19 crisis, we do see a huge increase on the criminal cases. So there's certainly some opportunity the actors are taking because there's uncertainty. And for example, if you can, for a few weeks back, you cannot find any face mask to purchase. If somebody sends you a purchasing site for a face mask, you probably are more because you're kind of in a panic trying to find some, and you may easily get hooked and purchase something, but it may be a malicious site. And so there's a lot of uncertainty with supply chain, medical help, and these sort of things. Okay, next slide. Okay, one thing to illustrate the data, for example, this is data we get from our Smart Protection Network. One of the nodes that we collect from the sensors out there, we do see a huge increase on the spam, which I will talk about how that's related to phishing and rest of threat vectors. Next slide. And even specifically COVID-19 related threats, malware, we see there's huge increase. So this comes from our Smart Protection Network. It's just the feedback, a silent feedback we will receive from our devices that's out there, our customer input back to our network. Can you go to the next slide? So this kind of summary for United States is a month or so ago, where I want to particularly take note, the spam increases 220 times, at least from what we saw. So this may be a sample of worldwide data, but we're not talking about 220%. So there's a lot of spam are sending out to relate to COVID-19. But when we get to especially in malicious area, In phishing, we're talking about 2-3 times X, but that's still a fairly significant increase. Go ahead. Okay, so I will step back. I think Daniel, you advanced 2 slides, or this is the next slide. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I had another slide before this one, but we can use this one. That's fine. Yeah. To talk about it. It's kind of busy slide. My intention was to give you some technical appreciation on the issue here. If we look at the actors, we have people that's responsible for spam. There's probably a lot of them out there because we see the volume there is huge. And spam they may not be malicious. They may be just advertisement information, unwanted information you don't really care to read. And but phishing, when we talk about it, there's a specific purpose. Usually actor try to send information to you, so you will engage. So to individuals or even to offices. And on the right hand side, I have a separate office and home individuals. Usually office, you have the corporate network, and working from home, you're less protected in some ways. It really depends how you set things up. Of course, the big movement for the offices now is moving information to cloud, or sometimes we refer to as hybrid cloud, meaning you may the corporation may have some data that resides on the public cloud, something like Amazon Web Services, Office 365, such. And but they also may have some in a private cloud, and also they may still have some data, their own data center running the servers, whatnot, and usually the protection, there's multiple layers. So to prevent spam from coming in, usually there's quite a bit of filtering technology put in. So if you want a corporate network or you're subscribed to some sort of protection software, you will not see all the raw spam that's coming into your email box. And also same way goes to phishing and smishing. Phishing with email and smishing. But importantly, the phishing, usually what they try to do, and also smishing, which is the SMS phishing, that they try to do is establish what I intend to show you. There's that yellow line to establish a sort of a channel that where they can commit fraud. For example, I think Tonia already mentioned there may be some attachments, like you may get an email with some attachment with a file, an invoice, or whatnot. It may be in PDF or Excel format or Word format, but they're a legitimate document. But when you click on it, it does more than just open the document. It also maybe open some backdoors or vulnerability or drop some kind of virus on your machine. So sometimes what we see is in these instances, the particular document you may open, you may not see anything wrong with it, and you wonder why you got extra document that was sent to you. But what you don't know is maybe they're already opened a backdoor and silently try to collect information or steal information from your source. And so usually that's where I think the challenge for this audience, most of you are small, medium business that you don't have the luxury of a large corporation where you have a layer of protection, which I'm trying to illustrate here. And but it's important you do have some protection there, because you can see I put these icons that doesn't, it just show you that there's many layer, many intertwined technology that software can help you protect. And you may have some of these already, but having just a single endpoint scanner, like in the old days, you go to get a consumer grade, that may not give you the full protection you need. And it really depends on, it's a trade-off, right? As Daniel mentioned, there's maybe quite a bit of investment on the product, but but I think the actors would not go after a small company, try to do a like enterprise advanced advanced persistent threat kind of approach, and which is blend all sort of attacking vectors. And so for email and SMS messaging, they're attacking, but they're somewhat different, because SMS, a text message usually are limited. You read on a mobile device, but there's also a layer of protection mobile infrastructure carriers can provide. For example, if you never got the SMS text message, you want to need to really protect it at your mobile device level anyway. So sorry, this is kind of busy diagram, but this kind of give you an illustration how these things are related. And we can go to the next slide. Okay, yeah, it's a little bit out of sequence, so sorry, I made some last minute changes, so we didn't get we can go to the next slide. Okay, this is just one example. Like a company like us and a lot of other vendors that have a mobile security. This is what I was talking about. Running security, and your last defense layer is your what we call endpoint, your mobile device itself. We can actually try to block certain things where we've seen is inappropriate, but it works well if it complements with the layer mobile security, mobile carriers like AT&T, Verizon type of company, that they can also block certain amount of smishing messaging from upstream. And usually we have to have those work in conjunction to fully protect, but you're still going to get some smishing messaging, and that could be a category that's really growing fast. For example, when somebody, I got this just last week where a bank, let's say a Bank America, and they send me a fraud warning SMS saying, please click on this link because we suspect fraud on your credit card account. And let's just say, 20% population uses Bank America, your hit rate is going to be pretty high unless you carefully take a look at the URL link. And but sometimes, because your mobile device, you cannot see it as well, or you just don't think twice and click on it, and then you may be redirected to a malicious site. But the tools can help you where if you have the right web reputation service, because some of these malicious URL site is not permanent in a sense. It's actually a temporary website that the actors produce. So they're only good for so much time. So even though you may have the tools to block for you to arrive at the malicious website, but that's is sort of temporary. And also the web reputation service from these vendors may not be able to keep up. Anyway, next slide. Okay, all these say is that there's a lot of defense layer you can put in. I'll go one before. Yeah, most important, I think Tonia already mentioned, the user awareness, education, and your behavior. And ultimately, because with the phishing and smishing, ultimately the user have to make a decision that they get fooled by the email or text message that you click on something, you open the door. And so that awareness is quite good. Quite important for us to take. And from the survey we took earlier, it looks like this group, you're pretty confident you'll be able to tell the difference. But to keep in mind, the bad guys these days, their organization, you will find less and less a grammar error and a spelling error, the messaging, because they are well funded and they hire professionals just like our vendor like us do to protect you. And so just be aware of that, because there's profitability in the front and back side. Okay, next. I will specifically talk about BEC a little bit because I think this is a big growth area law enforcement like FBI are putting out warnings on, because this seems to be a sweet spot for small, medium business from the bad guys' point of view. And go ahead, next slide. So the BEC attack are very organized in nature usually, and so usually they will do their homework, because they're using less of a dropping of a malicious code on you, but they try to gain from the social interaction to gain some trust, and then they will redirect you to wire some money or respond to an invoice that's fake, and ultimately they try to get money from you. Are potentially we see an area where they actually launch ransomware after they gain some trust from the high level company like the CEO or CFOs, and so they do quite a bit of reconnaissance, and then once they engage, and a lot of times we see the actors they have separate teams to work on. There's team to do reconnaissance. There's team to do the interaction by email to commit a fraud, and then when you ready to transfer fund, they have another party that to get a funding, and because that way it's hard to trace back, and so these are well organized. And the next slide. So there's a lot of steps we can take. For example, especially if you're high, visible person in an organization, and try not to have any of your personal identifiable information on the line for sure. And a lot of times they can, if you post your internal information or your social activity in the community, try to limit that to certain groups only. And any doubt, always consult with your IT professionals. And also where this is happening in the small medium business a lot more than large enterprise, because large enterprise, they may have a sophisticated ERP system. It's hard to pay a vendor without them go through the process registering in your ERP system. And for small medium business, you may not have a sophisticated system, so a CEO send out a note to CFO, say go ahead, pay this company. They may just do it because they don't have a system to manage that, and that's what makes the small medium business more vulnerable. Certainly use cybersecurity tools to is part of the defense here. Go ahead, next. Okay, I think that this kind of next few slides wrap up my presentation, where this again, as we conducted from the previous workshop and seminars for small medium business, always observe your cybersecurity hygiene for best practice for device and user security. We mentioned, like, you always use strong authentication, multi-factor, and beware of like the different things, the vulnerability, whether your Wi-Fi or mobile devices that's out there, and just to stick with the fundamentals, and that's actually what goes a long way, because again, the human factor of the protection is quite important. Next slide. Yeah, and the user security, we have remote offices, and also important as far as the cyber defense, the backup is quite important. I think we always strongly encourage, because right now what you're trying to protect is your data, and it actually may worth a lot more than and also you have a lot of liability to the data itself. Okay, the next. Okay, we certainly have a lot of tools. I'm not going to go through those. That is one of the major vendor in cybersecurity. And next slide. So relating to COVID-19, there's a lot of resources out there to help you. And certainly we have we work with Daniel and CSA. We contribute to webinar and all these materials online. And also we work with several other nonprofit organizations for small medium business, such as SCORE, our cybercrime support network. So there's and also at our Trend Micro, we have a special area talk about all the potential threats and vulnerability due to COVID-19 that's hitting us pretty hard lately. Okay, Daniel, back to you.
Thanks so much, Mitchell. I really appreciate it. All the information that you provided, and thanks again for also being such a supporter of the National Cybersecurity Alliance and particularly the Cybersecurity My Business program as a whole. We have been receiving some of your questions, so we're going to get to those. I'm going to cover just a few slides, and then we're going to go to the Q&A, because one of the things we said we were going to talk about is not only phishing and smishing, but vishing, right? And so what is that? And so that funny little word vishing stands for voice phishing. And that's where you're going to receive the calls, right? Someone's going to try to trick you into giving out information, sensitive information over a phone call. And there are a few ways that they're doing this, or a few strategies they're taking in order to get you or your employees or your family members to give out sensitive information through a voice phishing voice phishing attack. And so one, they're using debt relief and credit repair scams. And so they're calling individuals, they're calling businesses to offer credit card interest rate reductions, to get student loans paid off. For businesses specifically, they're using business and investment scams. So they might promise you to help you start a business, or to give you business coaching, or to make an investment in your business. And if you submit to them certain information, then they will be able to begin the process. We're seeing a lot of charity scams over the phone right now. And so they're calling, if you make a financial donation to XYZ charity, then you will, so they're taking advantage of your generosity during these particular times. And these rear up during every natural disaster, during every sort of national disaster as a whole, every hurricane, every tornado. We're seeing a lot with COVID-19 right now, particularly charity scams. They're going to offer free trials over the phone. And one of the biggest we're seeing with businesses with vishing is tech support. So they will call an employee and say, we're your tech support and we want to remote into your computer. But this doesn't happen just in business to manipulate an employee. It also happens at home. They call and they say, hello, this is Norton, or whoever it is. We've identified something on your computer and we need to remote in, or we need you to give us access to your computer. And we see that a lot. And so being hyper vigilant of not only the threats that are coming in via an attachment or a link in email, or an attachment and a link in a text message, but also threats that are coming over the phone through voice. And so we're still seeing all of these being operational to manipulate businesses as much as possible in order to give out credentials or financial information. And so the scammers are using everything they can in order to manipulate businesses and consumers. So when you steer clear of the VISH, a few tips we have from the National Cybersecurity Alliance. One, of course, is never give out personal information over the phone. If someone calls, I had an instance where quote unquote Visa called my grandmother and said that they needed her credit card number to be verified. So she pulled out her credit card and I quickly pulled it out of her hands. That's an example of how they're trying to manipulate senior citizens in particular. It's a very common senior citizen scam. Another common senior citizen scam in particular is calling and saying your grandchild or parents as a whole, your child or your grandchild is traveling overseas and they can't, they're hurt or they don't have access to money. We need you to wire money to them immediately. And so one thing we always say for the National Cybersecurity Alliance is verify to clarify. And this should also be a policy for if someone calls your place of business and requests to remote into a computer, or says that they are your IT support or your IT vendor, or someone who is taking the place of your trusted IT representative. Verify the legitimacy of that request by maybe it's politely hanging up and calling a trusted number, or asking someone else if that person is legitimate, or calling other family members to see if your other family members are traveling. So always verify to clarify the request. And the same thing goes with your verifying a link that you receive in an email. Know your contacts. Make sure your employees know who your trusted IT vendors are, so that if someone does call them, they know who to trust and who not to trust. I talked about policies and procedures. If you receive a pre-recorded call, that cyber criminals are using pre-recorded calls to seem more legitimate, that does not mean that something is legitimate.